Okay, with those introductory remarks, let's now begin session number 1. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Amber Freed. She is the CEO and founder of SLC6A1 Connect. Amber will now enlighten us with her topic, the patient view. So I'll turn it over to Amber now.
Wonderful. I was just saying, I'm so happy to be here today. I can't tell you how much this means to me that everyone thought enough of me to ask, and how much iExcels honors the rare disease experience and how much they've meant to my family. And it's also really cool to be in this conference with many of my personal heroes. Today, I'm here to share the story of my family and my son, Maxwell. I spent my career as an equity analyst for a hedge fund, but I was never totally complete. And on March 27th, 2017, my world became complete when I welcomed Mr. Maxwell and Miss Riley James. And as you can see, they are absolute heaven. I was ecstatic, content, and life was absolutely perfect. Soon after he was born, he looked perfectly normal, but he just wasn't progressing like his natural benchmark, Riley. And he had really bizarre symptoms. Like he would do this constantly. Like, look at his finger, I'll do a side view. And everybody would say, oh, it's a baby that found his finger. And I was like, no, he does this 12 hours a day. And another doctor was able to diagnose somebody on the spot. But
Okay.
he would just like stare at his finger. He'd make a hook with his finger like a pirate and just weirdly shake his hand. And nearly every SLC child does this as a baby. He had really strange movement, almost like Parkinson's. And I remember going into my pediatrician and describing him as floppy. Then mother's intuition started sounding louder than a freight train because I would write down all of these things Riley was doing every month in her baby book, but he couldn't. And it was bittersweet and it was making me cry. And I just knew something was very, very wrong. We started down a really long and terrible diagnostic odyssey. And finally, Maxwell was told, we were told he needed genetic testing. I was so confused. No diseases run in our families. And then one day we received the phone call from Children's to come in immediately. And it was at this moment when I got that phone call and they said, come in as soon as you can, we'll clear our schedules. I knew it was just so bad. I probably shouldn't have been driving as I was shaking driving to the hospital. And once we were there, we were led to a really bad newsroom. It was a sterile, cold room. But what I most remember were the sad faces of the doctors. It was a human moment where I could tell that they were as sad as I was and they hadn't said anything. And the doctor said, your son has been diagnosed with SLC6A1. And I looked at them and I said, okay, what's the disease? And they said SLC6A1. And I said, so nobody wants credit for it? And the doctor said, no, it was too rare for a name. time was standing still, so I took out my phone and Googled the disease, and it said, no results found. We've all had that moment where we've accidentally fat fingered a Google search and something comes up. Never had the experience of having no search results found. And then doctors explained that this was the genetic location, and we fell into the bucket of too rare to care, and nothing could ever or would ever be done. Inherently, because we've all been alive, we've suffered our most dark moment of our life. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, this was my dark moment, to be holding your tiny little baby and so many hopes and dreams, and for them just to be wiped out, and there's nothing, there's no hope. And I was trying to take in this information and take notes, and my husband's shoulders began to shake as he was bawling. And it was at that moment that I realized I had my entire life to cry and mourn what happened. But in this moment, I didn't have that luxury. Maxwell didn't have that luxury. And so I decided that I was going to fight like a mother. I was going to fight like I was on the third monkey on the loading deck to Noah's Ark, and it just started to rain. This was about my son, and I will fight to the absolute death for him. I immediately left my career at Janice Henderson and started Googling. And let me tell you, it's been a really wild ride. I think one thing I loved about working in equities is that the stock market has this unique mechanism to remind you every single day that you're stupid and you can learn more. It doesn't matter how much research you do on a stock, how great of model you build. There are always black swan events. There's always something you could have never predicted. You are a constant student, and science is much more than that, than even the equity market. I have many times in life now where I wonder what used to stress me out. So I went home and I called thousands of scientists. It was really hard to find people who understood the gene SLC6A1, but they understood GAT1 transporters and the mechanism of GABA. And so I started with larger diseases and piggybacked off of those. I became the expert myself. I called people during Asia and Australia at night, Europe the early morning, and the US during the day. I was a zombie. I would go to every conference available. But, if you're going to kill a cow, you better make a burger. So I formed a 501c3, started finding every patient from around the world, started building a registry, got a natural history study off the ground, stalked key scientists, convinced them as to why they should work with me. And here we are 4 years later, and we really have built somewhat of a miniature biotech. It started that I had to send scientists snacks via Uber Eats every single day to be remembered. And now we have a scientific dream team. I am just so proud of what my tiny little organization has built. We've successfully repurposed an FDA-approved drug that is keeping most children fairly stable. And this repurposed drug is allowing us the time to advance novel DNA and RNA therapies that will be the closest thing our children will ever know in their lifetime. We're working with biotechs. We've raised nearly $5 million. We've spent a lot of money. We're working with 15 academic centers, and it has just been something. And I would say the huge highlight of this journey has been seeing the hope in our patients' eyes. When Maxwell was diagnosed, he was one of 34. And I think that's really what happens with rare disease. You think it's ultra rare and that you're the only person in the world, but that's not true. We just haven't had the good diagnostics. And as newborn screening expands and testing panels expand and studies have expanded, we've found that we're actually just massively underdiagnosed. We're the 10th cause of autism, the 6th cause of epilepsy, the number 1 cause of drop seizures, and we're related to many psychiatric conditions. The story of Maxwell has really transcended the little Freed family, and we all have the opportunity to impact a multitude. But what I really want to drive home today is that rare disease affects us all. This picture here, I want to draw everybody's attention to. This little boy was named Gunnar. He was the same age as Maxwell when his mother received a different diagnosis, but they were very, very similar. And we were working on holistic techniques, talking to the same scientists. Gunnar's outlook was actually better than Maxwell's upon diagnosis. But you don't know what you don't know. And what I can tell you, that the day Gunnar passed away, I collected those Cookie Monsters to donate to Cook Children's Hospital as his casket was draped with the Texas state flag for his daddy that served as a Navy SEAL for our great country. And we weren't able to meet the needs of this little boy. His mother read Goodnight Elmo because that was Gunnar's favorite book. I also just want to say today that it's patients that drive treatment. None of us chose this career or chose this passion. It's this little face of Maxwell and the other little faces that make this a passion. We advocate, we become PhDs, MDs, we raise ludicrous amounts of money. We do things that we could never do for ourselves. We know the disease better than everybody. And if patients were involved more from the beginning of every trial, the success rate would be much higher, much, much higher, because we know what matters to our patient population and what needs to improve and how endpoints should be structured to make trials successful. And we give a lot up to do this. Like, I had an incredible career that I really loved. And of course, I'm happy doing what I do now, but it's reopening a wound every single time I talk about this, and it's become so much easier. But, we're taking care of sick loved ones. We have anxiety. We have fear. The divorce rate has skyrocketed with rare disease families. I mean, my husband couldn't do it. He just wasn't built for this level of care for young kids and the amount of support Maxwell is going to need for the rest of his life. And it's really scary being a single parent with 5-year-old twins, raising a rare disease child and not knowing what's in any of our future. But what drives us every day is the hope and knowing that our kids are absolutely worth it. If you would like to follow my journey, I update LinkedIn regularly. Feel free to scan me and friend me on LinkedIn. And I promise to, well, IXL is a huge part of my journey. So I promise to keep everybody up to date. Thank you so much for having me today.